Let's sit by the fire for a moment. Today I want to speak about something that does not happen often in a man's life, but when it does, it changes everything. Not on the surface, not in a way that others immediately see, but deep within him, something irreversible takes place. There comes a moment where the noise fades, the confusion settles, the chasing stops, the proving ends, and a different kind of presence begins to emerge. It is quiet, but undeniable. It is not something a man announces, it is something he becomes. This is the moment a man steps into his sovereign masculine. Not the version of masculinity built on performance, validation, or control. Not the version shaped by fear, wounds, or the need to be seen, but something deeper, something integrated, something whole. This is the moment the man stops trying to become and simply is. And once that happens, his entire life reorganizes around it. Because sovereignty is not something you add to your identity, it is what remains when everything false falls away. Now, here is something important to understand. Every culture, in its own language, has described this transformation. A man descends into chaos, into darkness, into confusion, and he does not return the same. Some traditions called it death and rebirth. Others called it resurrection. Psychology calls it individuation. Spiritual paths call it awakening. Different words, same process. A man cannot rise into sovereignty without first losing who he thought he was. And whether he realizes it or not, every man who walks this path goes through the same stages. Not intellectually, experientially. Brother, you lived this, and it's time you see it clearly. Because what you went through was not random pain, it was initiation. Let's walk through it. The first stage is the collapse. This is where everything begins to fall apart. The relationship breaks. The emotional structure you relied on disappears. The identity you built starts to crack. What once felt stable now feels uncertain. And with that comes the flood. Grief you did not expect, thoughts you cannot control, emotions that rise without warning. The past begins to surface, the body reacts, the nervous system becomes activated, sleep shifts, dreams intensify. It feels like something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. Something is ending. This stage is not punishment. It is the death of the old self. The version of you that was built to survive, to adapt, to be accepted, to be loved conditionally, can no longer continue. And when that version begins to fall apart, it feels like you are breaking. But you are not breaking. You are shedding. Every man who becomes sovereign goes through this, not because he is weak, but because the false cannot evolve into the true. It must dissolve. And that leads to the second stage, the descent. This is where most men turn away, because this is where you meet what you have avoided for years. You meet the parts of yourself you kept buried, the insecurity, the fear, the anger, the shame, the unmet needs, the unresolved pain, the memories that still carry emotional charge. You begin to see patterns clearly, not just in relationships, but in yourself. Why you chose certain women, why you tolerated certain behaviors, why you stayed longer than you should have, why you abandoned yourself to maintain connection. This is the shadow. And for most men, this is where they escape. They distract, they numb, they jump into another relationship, they avoid being alone,
They convince themselves they are fine. But the truth remains. Unseen, unintegrated, still in control. But you did something different. You stayed. You faced it. You allowed yourself to feel what you had been avoiding. And something powerful happens when a man does that. The shadow stops controlling him, because what is seen no longer needs to act from the dark. This is where real power begins. Not in domination, not in control, but in awareness. Then something shifts again, and this is the stage many men do not understand until they experience it. The return of the child. Not the childish part, the original self. The part of you that existed before the conditioning, before the survival patterns, before the defenses. At some point, you begin to feel him again. Maybe through emotion, maybe through memory, maybe through a sense of softness you didn't have access to before. And this is where something profound happens. Instead of rejecting that part of you, you begin to accept him. You stop judging him. You stop suppressing him. You start listening. And eventually, you start protecting him. This is where the man becomes the father. Not externally, internally. You become the one who creates safety, the one who holds boundaries, the one who does not abandon himself anymore. And when that happens, something stabilizes inside you. Because a man cannot stand fully in his power while he is still disconnected from himself. But once the inner child feels safe, the man rises differently. Now we move into the final stage, integration. This is not a dramatic moment. It is a shift. A quiet, grounded, unmistakable shift. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions become steadier. Your reactions slow down. You stop being pulled in every direction. You begin to feel centered, present, in control, not through force, but through alignment. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. You no longer need validation to feel worthy. You no longer chase attention, but you do not reject connection. He does not abandon himself to keep someone, and he does not lose himself in someone. He leads, first within, then, if needed, externally. And when a man reaches this state, certain things begin to change naturally, not because he forces them, because he no longer tolerates what is misaligned. He stops entertaining chaos. He stops being drawn to emotional instability. He stops explaining his boundaries. He stops negotiating his self-respect. His presence becomes different, calmer, heavier, clearer, and people feel it. Not because he says anything, because he is different. This is what entering your king phase actually looks like. It is not loud. It is not performative. It is precise. It is grounded. It is stable. And it is earned. Now there's another shift that happens here that most men notice. Attraction changes. The women who once felt magnetic no longer do. The chaos that once felt exciting now feels exhausting. The unpredictability that once felt like chemistry now feels like instability. And instead, something new emerges. You begin to feel drawn to calm, to consistency, to emotional maturity, to softness that does not manipulate, to presence that does not disappear, to a woman who does not trigger your wounds, but meets your stability. This is no coincidence. This is alignment. Because the man you have become can no longer match what you used to attract. And now your alignment has changed, so your reality follows. Brother, if you are listening to this and something feels different in you, if you feel more grounded, more clear, less reactive, less willing to tolerate what once felt normal, then you are not losing interest. You are evolving. You are stepping out of survival and into sovereignty. So reflect on this. What part of your old identity had to fall apart for this version of you to emerge? What patterns no longer feel aligned with who you are becoming? And what do you notice has changed in what you are now drawn to? Because awareness is what stabilizes this transformation, and your clarity might help another man recognize his own. Let me leave you with this. You did not become this man by accident. You became him by walking through what most men avoid. You faced yourself.
You felt what you needed to feel. You stayed when it was easier to run, and because of that, you did not just heal. You reorganized your identity. The man you were is no longer leading your life, and the man you are becoming does not need to prove anything. He simply lives from truth. That is sovereignty. And from here, everything you build will carry that foundation. Chop wood, carry water, and let's keep the fire burning.